Hi everyone, my name is Haddy and I'm a journalist and communications specialist. I believe that as Africans, we should be in charge of every narrative coming out of Africa. We have a lot of positive stories to tell and share with the world, and I'm determined to use my platform to make that a reality. This is why I've teamed up with the Fata Network to bring you a brand new show, Stories from the Continent, every Saturday at 4 p.m. Do make sure you join us. There will be lots of fun, informative and impactful conversation. Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Stories from the Continent. It's good to have you with us. Today we have Dr. Ismaila Ceesay joining us to discuss education systems in the Gambia and beyond. If you've been watching the show, you'll know that education has taken center stage a few times now. But today I'm hoping that we'll be able to go into greater depth on the role of education in developing the continent. My very special guest, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, is the head of political science department and senior lecturer at University of the Gambia. Dr. Ceesay, welcome. It's so good to have you with us.
Thank you, Haddy. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Ceesay, as I said, I want us to have a conversation about reforming education in the Gambia and building a system that teaches us the right and also the necessary skills that we need to succeed in the 21st century and beyond. So let me start by asking you to frame the picture for us a little bit. Can you give us a sense of what the current state of education is in the Gambia?
Well, currently the state is bad. The current system lacks quality, it lacks relevance as well. Even though we've done a lot of work in the past 20 years to increase access, especially in the rural areas, but the access did not correspond to quality and relevance. And I've always been arguing that we need comprehensive education reform in this country if we are to usher the Gambia into the 21st century, to prepare the young ones and get them ready for jobs that have not been created yet, for technologies that have not been invented yet. And that is what's happening, because we live in a very fast and rapidly changing global world. And Gambia must be ready to take part in this global world. And therefore, for us to be ready, we need to equip our citizens with the right tools they need to survive in this very rapidly changing and very complex global world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being so honest with your answer, but I want us to go a little bit deeper. We know that on top of everything you've said, we know that schooling is not compulsory. There's an insufficient number of schools to enroll everyone of learning age. We know that there's a lack of teachers, low salaries, a literacy rate of somewhere between 40 to 50%, and again the figures are unclear, which leads us to the challenge of a lack of data, and that's a whole nother challenge in itself. So in 2020, in this day and age, we're clearly behind, like you said, on access to quality education as a sustainable development goal. How concerned are you about this?
I'm very concerned when I look at the output of our education system. And also the input as well. When I look at the investment levels as well, with regards to GDP, and when I look at infrastructure, when I look at teachers, when I look at teacher training, but particularly output, we've been really bad. And as someone working at university for the past 10 years, having access to students who graduate straight from grade 12 to the university, I've seen a drop in quality in terms of the students that we receive. And that shows that we've not been able to, and also we've not been able to do proper research to understand the drop in quality. And that's not been happening, because what Gambia lacks today is what we call R&D, research and development, especially within the education sector. We should have been engaging in a lot of research and development, a lot of research in the education sector so we can develop it. And we've not been doing that. So therefore, we've really ignored that aspect of it. And also education has been neglected. And even though if you look at the development blueprints in the Gambia, from the PRSPs to the PA to the Vision 2020 to the current NDP, the promise has not been matching actions, actually. They've really talked about how education should be key in terms of as the driving force for Gambia's development. But there has not been a corresponding investment in the education sector, a corresponding reform in the education sector, especially in the higher education subsector. Even though, yes, they've invested a lot in the basic and lower education, secondary education. But even that, if you look at the budget that is spent on education, most of it is on operations cost and not in terms of software itself, in terms of teacher training. And you look at Gambia College, it is supposed to produce the teachers for to teach our kids. There, it's been a problem. There has not been investment, and we've been having problems of retention. We could not retain the best teachers because of motivation, incentives are not there, the salary is not good, and because also rural communities are not, many teachers don't want to live in rural communities. So therefore, if you look at the disparities, in fact, it's not only about the privilege or the deprived, but also the rural-urban divide as well. And also, so these are all problems that we are grappling with. And I think if the Gambia is to come up with a new development paradigm, if the Gambia is to make it into the 21st century, I think education is key, and two things need to be done, that is investment and reforms in the education sector.
Thank you. And like I said, we'll go into greater depth on education and education systems. But for now, though, let's take a step back. When people saw you were coming on the show, everyone said, we know him, but we don't know his story. So let's start with your own personal journey from Brikama to Sierra Leone, Sweden, Edinburgh, where you did your PhD in African Studies. Take us back to the beginning, Dr. Ceesay, and tell us how you ended up coming back to the Gambia.
Well, actually, like you said, I was born and bred in Brikama. I did my primary school education in Brikama. I did my nursery education in Brikama. And then when I finished primary 6, then it was a common entrance. We didn't have the current system of the grades. We had the common entrance, and then you go to Form 1 to Form 5. Okay. Or if you don't perform well in the common entrance, you have the option to go to the technical training secondary school. But then when I did the common entrance in 1990, 91, I guess, thereabout, I couldn't get I think I missed the mark by 1, or I was just exact on the mark that could give me access to high school. And because of that, I didn't have the contacts that could help me to get to one of the high schools I preferred. Even though I could have got access to other high schools like Muslim High or Armitage or the Brikama Secondary School, but I didn't want to go to those schools because at that time, St. Augustine, St. Peter's, Gambia High School were seen as prestigious schools, and because all my friends were going there and I wanted to go there. Okay. And because I wasn't allowed, I didn't have access because I didn't have the right grade to go there. I was forced to drop out from school for about 6 months to 1 year, sitting at home and doing nothing, because then I didn't have anybody to help me because my mom was out of the country for one reason or the other. So when she came back and realized that I had already missed a whole year of schooling and I was engaged into some other informal activities, she made a decision that it was perhaps better at that time to ship me off to Sierra Leone to do my high school education there. And she thought that with the kind of discipline, with the kind of orientation, with the kind of good schools in Sierra Leone, that would help me a lot. So I went to Sierra Leone. I went to Albert Academy. It was a very prestigious, very good school. I did my high school education there at the boarding school, but intermittently also, because the boarding school life was very harsh, I was living with some family members. And while living with family members, I was also taught about life. I mean, because most of these family members were single, they were uncles who lived alone. I used to cook, I used to wash my clothes and their clothes, I used to iron, I used to clean, I used to go and fetch water. So I did all those things at home, and then I go to school during the day. After school, I go to the market, do the Ndure. So man do madam kir matoga by 6 o'clock parena toga, ma clean everywhere, ass body, ma clean rotindo new for the following day. And Saturday, the whole of day Saturday, the food, then the whole day Sunday parcel. So that taught me life. So Moje Hale School in 95, because Mane Sierra Leone actually, the rebellion was still in the provinces, but exit on Freetown. So my plan was Somajale School, high school, Form 5, Form 6, Albert Academy. My plan was to go to Frobe College to do my university education. But unfortunately, the year that was supposed to happen, Sila Rebellion Freetown. So I was evacuated, Sila Nyipse Gambia. So Nyipse Gambia, that was just in time when the coup was just new in 1995. And at that time, nobody didn't have one because at that time, someone on contacts for legacy civil service, they don't want to am job, and I didn't have those contacts as well. So you didn't have one in the street corners, the Haladne, you want to go to Europe because you thought that was the only way you could make it in the Gambia. So then I'm yon, then Madam Sweden, and Madam Sweden. At first, I wasn't into education. I was only the just the live like any other hustler, any other person could take a Sweden, the live for as a migrant. After a couple of years, I realized that no, man, I think I could do better than just being in Sweden, the league, pension. Man, I think I need to go to school. So still I apply at the university, New reject my because my Sierra Leone grade certificates were not good enough to enter university in Sweden. Then I had to go through a whole process of 3 years at their Folkhögskola or Convox, that's the adult education, because I was over 18. And then Balamaduga University in Sweden. So I thought like, no, that's a waste of time. But at some point, whenever I said I'm not gonna do it, something was always pushing me to do it. So Madeflo normal paresi, Madam Stockholm's University, must study political science in English. Why? Because I'd always had it back of my mind that someone knowledge had to benefit Gambia. I was never having any plan to study in Europe and stay there. So because Gambia is English-speaking country, would have been better to do my studies in English. So I did partly English, partly Swedish. BSc wouldn't be enough. The kind of work I want to do in Gambia, I need more cutting-edge knowledge. So Sila decided to do masters, but then I'm gonna do it in the UK because then I was planning to come home. So my UK Gambia system is much more similar. So then I decided to do something on African politics because I've always been fascinated with African politics. And I had two options, either SOAS in London or Center for African Studies in Edinburgh. And because I didn't like London, so the ultimate choice was Edinburgh, of course. So still had Edinburgh, for masters, intensive 1 year, Majale masters B. Okay, now I think it's time for me to go back and apply some of the knowledge I acquire and experience in the Gambia. So Nipse Gambia, I had many options, either to go down to the ministries to work or in the civil service, but no, Gambia will be ready at some point for nation building. And we need knowledge for this nation building. And the young people will be needed because I had always believed in the potentials of young people in this country, that they will be the vanguards of change in this country. But without the necessary skills and the necessary knowledge and the tools for them to lead this change, do one of them. And at that time, the university was on, it was new. Okay, I think the best place to go is to go to the university and apply my knowledge there to teach these young ones and prepare them for the task ahead. So Sila them apply for a job at UTG, New Jelma, the political science department. I taught there for 2 years, 2.5 years. And I thought I need a terminal degree if I wanted to really have an impact. So Sila to Edinburgh, do my PhD, Majal 2016. But in between my PhD, I was coming back and forth at my own expense to teach at UTG, going back. Majal 2016, La Nipsey Ward finally, and then working at the university, trying to still continue the work when started in 2009 with Nipsey, and we are still doing that work because we believe the only way the country can move, because the country has a huge potential and these are the young people, but they cannot have an impact if they're not given the right tools and the right knowledge for them to have that impact. So that is why I thought that the university was the best place for me to go and work.
Okay, thank you for sharing that story with us. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to everything you said about not getting the right grades and then wanting to go outside of the Gambia to study. But I think it's incredible that you came back home working at the university, applying the knowledge that you've gained to the future generations, and you're continuing to do that. Dr. Ceesay, you've had an incredibly successful career, obviously. You're now working, as you said, and I said as well in the beginning, as the head of the political science department at UTG. You're also the founder and director of the MSc program in international relations at the university. Explain to us now what your work entails and how you're helping to improve education in your department.
So what happened was that because the political science was a very small department. In fact, at that time, Bumane County Political Science Department, it was in a very famous department. It wasn't very popular. People thought that we have political science, like Kubuga politics, more of political science. And at that time, the former president had portrayed this view of people who study political science as aimless. In fact, most of the scholarships that were coming from the office of the president were going for the STEM subject, the sciences, and political science was not considered because it wasn't seen as a priority. So I realized that we were taking like 15 to 20 students per semester when I came. That was the trend. So when I came, I think I inspired a lot of young people to do political science, and we started seeing an increase in the numbers of students that are applying for the political science program to almost 200 to 300 per semester. And then we realized that most of the curriculum that was there, the program was outdated because it's not fit for purpose. It doesn't really solve 21st century problems. It doesn't prepare our new political scientists, our aspiring political scientists to think 21st century. So I had to revise the curriculum to make it fit for purpose, to respond to respond and be able to solve 21st century cutting edge problems. But then I also realized that there was no MSc, that most of the students they graduate from the political science department. It was difficult to get scholarship because we all know now that in Europe before it was easy to get scholarship, but now scholarships are globally competitive. Better scholarship, someone in India will apply, someone in Nigeria will apply, someone in Gambia will apply. So most Gambians are disadvantaged. So so Sila realized that we really need to get a master's program here at UTG Bohamne. It's gonna be based on quality, but again, feeling so students are given the chance to do their masters in the Gambia. So Sila designed a master's program on international relations and diplomacy because after I realized that our foreign policy, our foreign service was devoid of quality. And I realized that diplomacy in the 21st century, especially multilateral diplomacy, what we need is quality. We need trained diplomats to be able to represent Gambia, properly in international institutions, whether it be the UN, WTO, wherever, but also through international negotiations, but also in our respective embassies. So I realized that most students were very interested in that. So I designed the program, and I must start and I started with a cohort of almost 50 students. About 100 students applied because it's a very popular course, but more field with interviews and a process of admission. I started with 50 students. Fortunately, the first cohort obviously graduated, but because we lack the capacity, we lack the manpower on the ground, people with PhD degrees to be able to teach those courses, I relied on the Gambian diaspora. So I built a network of Gambian scholars in the diaspora. So they use and services. So whenever they are coming for holidays, let's say 2-3 months or 2 weeks in the Gambia in the summer, they engage, then I teach in that program certain courses. Or sometimes I order the university to pay for some scholars, Gambian scholars, to come. We buy their ticket, we pay for their feeding and their accommodation. We also give them a token to teach in the program. So most of the lecturers who taught most of the professors are visiting professors. I think I was the only professor who was in-house, who was teaching in the program, but most of the professors were coming from outside, and they are both Gambian and non-Gambian because I tried to use my networks extensively from Edinburgh and from other universities to bring in the scholars. So fortunately, the first cohort had graduated. The second cohort will graduate in January, and I'm just with the third cohort now. New start tamit they're on it, and it's been a very, very successful program because most of the people that graduate go on to work in the Gambia's foreign service. But also, not only that, I'm also the director of student affairs, acting director. When you realize we didn't have an acting director for far too long in the students affairs, they advertised that position for many years, but can we apply because of the pay scale is not good. So I was asked to act and to make sure that we create a student-friendly environment, and I also use my networks to make sure that we have a student-friendly environment, to make sure that we do coaching for students and make sure that we prepare them, we give them career advice, and make sure that whenever concerns and problems they have, we try to solve it for them. So I've been very busy at the university, being the head of the political science department, making sure that the political science program is running well and is up to date, reviewing the curriculum, engaging staff, making sure that everything is working fine. But at the same time, also helping students in the office of the Directorate of the Students Affairs. But the most challenging part is being the director of the program, the MSc program, because we deal with a lot of Gambians. They're all And the challenge here is that because they cannot have classes during the day because most of them are civil servants, so we always have classes in the evenings. So time they relax here. So they want to talk here to make sure that I teach the programs and direct the programs. But so this is what we've been doing at the university.
I think, you know, everything that you said just now leads us very nicely to my next question, which is that for me, I was educated in the Gambia for the first 12 years of my life. And from my own experience, I would say 60, maybe even 70% of the teachers in the school I went to, Ndaus, were Africans, yes, but they were non-Gambians. I want you to tell us why you think that is, and also is that changing now?
Yeah, because one of the things that Lunyu Sonal the brain drain, because at a time when I think the popularity of having foreign teachers, especially teachers from Sierra Leone and Nigeria, became very popular in the early 90s to mid 90s going forward, because of what at that time the brain drain was almost at its height. It was easier for young Gambians to go to Europe. So many Gambians opted to go to Europe and not go to the teaching field. And at that time, war had ravaged Sierra Leone and Liberia. So most of the refugees who were coming were teachers, and they came to the Gambia. That is why you realize that at that time, most of the schools were having Sierra Leonean and Liberian teachers, and to some extent, some Nigerian teachers. Because most young Gambians think it wasn't worthwhile venture to go into the teaching field, because the teaching field was not attractive. It was neglected. It was ignored. In fact, it was seen as a poor man's vocation. The middle class don't even want their children to become teachers. They want their children to become engineers and lawyers and you name it, and not to become teachers. That is why only people who are from rural communities and from poor backgrounds opted for the teaching field, not because of they have the quality, but because they think it's the easiest way to get a job. So at that time, that was the case. But now that is changing now, because also most of these countries have reconstructed, they are back on their feet, and most of the teachers have gone back. So now I realize that the rate of foreign teachers in our classrooms have dropped a bit, even though we still have some, especially in schools like Marina. Most of the private schools, they still engage, and SBEC, they still engage foreign teachers. But most of the public schools are having Gambian teachers, because public schools obviously are neglected. The pay is not good. So most of the foreign teachers also want to get higher pay, so they go to private schools. A little more negative happen, but that has decreased a bit. Now we have more Gambian teachers. The problem now is the quality, because obviously, like I said, we've not invested both in the software component and the hardware component of Gambia College. It's been neglected. That is why Gambia College Lumo produce it leaves much to be desired. So when Gambia College produces substandard teachers because of lack of investment, obviously the whole education, it will have a ripple effect on the whole education system, because these are the guys who are going to teach the children. But the teachers who teach the teachers themselves, sometimes there's a problem with that. So the whole system is kind of flawed, has a fundamental problem, and we need serious reform, serious rethinking of education in the Gambia, a serious rethinking actual of education in Gambia. What kind of education system do we want? And this will be informed by the kind of society we want as well, because every society, every generation, you tailor your education sector based on the kind of society you want today, based on the kind of complex problems you want to solve today, and the kind of society you want tomorrow, and the kind of complex problems you anticipate you think you're going to have tomorrow. Because the purpose of education, one of the purposes is to solve society's problems. I mean, if our education sector cannot solve problems of climate change that we're having today, problems of food insecurity, problems of environmental problems, problems of security, problems of housing, problems of road accidents, problems of urban planning. If our education sector cannot solve these problems, bad roads, the energy, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the education sector, because it's supposed to solve these problems today. We're not supposed to rely on foreign knowledge, foreign expertise to build our roads, to maintenance our roads, to fix our energy problem, to tell us about our climate change resilience. That is why I had always believed that one of the fundamental problems that we Africans made from independence during decolonization was that we failed to decolonize education itself. Because the education sector during the colonial period, during the colonial project, was to serve the colonial project. It was two things, basically to ease communication between the colonized and the colonial master, but also to provide that stock of manpower for the civil service that the colonialists needed. So the education sector was tailored to serve the colonial project. So when the colonial project ended and we decolonized, we should have decolonized academia or education itself and rely more on indigenous knowledge, because Africa had indigenous knowledge. We could have relied on our indigenous languages as a mode of instruction in our schools, but because we failed to do all those things, we failed to reform the education sector, we failed to decolonize education. What happened was that today we failed to indigenize also knowledge as well. We carried on with the thinking of that inferiority complex, that our knowledge was inferior to the Western knowledge, and we carried on with that, and still that is why today we're having this problem. That is why today the Asian countries have surpassed us in terms of development, even though in 65, countries like Singapore were considered as hopeless cases, and countries like Nigeria had been predicted to far surpass Hong Kong in terms of their development potentials. But today it's the reverse. Today we are still behind because of one of the serious mistakes we made was not to decolonize our education sector, was not to reform the education sector to respond to Africa's complex problems and to be able to solve Africa's complex problems. And we are still facing those problems. That is why until today, our education sector is not fit for purpose, because why it fails to solve our basic problems today. It fails to solve our complex problems today. And the current pattern it is taking, the current trajectory, it will not be able to solve our future problems, and it will not be able to build us a society that we yearn for in the next 25, 30, 40 years.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ceesay. I also thought it was important to hear from the students themselves. So I reached out to a few students studying at the university before this interview, and majority of them kind of echoed a lot of what you've said. They say the real problem is leadership. You know, they say the curriculum should reflect and relate to the skills that are required in the job market. The issue of few lecturers and so many students was also raised. So they say classrooms are overpopulated. Does all of this, you know, again, sound accurate to you?
Yes, I mean, obviously, I've been working hard to solve this problem, and I've written extensively on these issues. That one of the problems we are facing is investment, basically, because today, I mean, look at UTG. Normally, any university that is worth its salt is not supposed to have master's degree holders teaching full-time courses. I'm not critiquing UTG. I'm just telling you that it's not the fault of UTG. It's because the government has failed to invest in this higher education subsector. That is why today, if you look at our teaching staff, almost 80% are not terminal degree holders, because we are not able to attract terminal degree, the best brains to come to UTG. I mean, that is why research is lacking at UTG. That is why leadership is lacking at UTG, because today, most of our PhD terminal degree holders who are Gambian, who are supposed to come to you, don't want to come because they think the salary is poor. I mean, you get a PhD, you are offered a job, you are paid 3,000 euros elsewhere, and they pay you $500 in the Gambia. You don't want to come with all the problems that this country is facing. So one of the problems we are facing is that we have not invested in the hardware of our education, higher education subset. That is why we have very limited classroom space. That is why, and we also fail to plan properly at UTG. And that is not only UTG, but the whole higher education subsector. Because what the universities should have done is to have an R&D department, even though planning was supposed to do that, but they have not been successful in doing that. That is, you plan ahead. You look at the current number of intakes as they rise over the past 5 years and make projections that, look, UTG is admitting at least an increment of 5% every year. Therefore, it is projected that by 2025, we'll have 10,000 students being admitted at UTG. You plan for 10,000 students now by starting to building the right infrastructure now. You don't wait until it explodes. That is what had happened to us. We failed to make the right projections. We failed to make the right planning. And all of a sudden, we had an explosion of students having an interest to come to UTG. But not only that, even people who had missed the bus before, who didn't have higher education certificate, coming to UTG. So we realized that every intake, we have much more students than what the infrastructure can cater for. That is why we have problems of seeing a class that's supposed to take 20 students, having 100 students. That is why some students, even the class are so overfilled that some students even stand outside. And we have staff problems. We cannot retain the best staff because once they get better opportunities elsewhere, they go. People like us stayed because we believed in the Gambia. We believed in the Gambian project. We believe the Gambia can make it. And when I look the only thing that gives me fulfillment, that makes me stay at UTG for 10 years, is when I look at the eyes of these young people, their passion for knowledge, their drive, and that makes me stay, nothing else. It's not the reward, it's not the money, because the money is not, the pay is not good, there are no incentives, we are not motivated, we are not given any opportunities. But when I look at these young people, every year I say I'm going to leave, but when I look at these young people, their drive for knowledge, their passion, I said I will be failing a generation if I should really leave this university at this juncture. But we've been having these problems, and I think the government of the Gambia should take the higher education subsector seriously. Both Gambia College that produces the teachers, both University Gambia that produces the academics and the scientists that are supposed to produce the scientists and the right technology, and also the DTTI that are supposed to create the pool of technical capacity, but also the MER are supposed to train our administrators. One thing that we have failed to do in the Gambia is that there has not been a collaboration between government, industry, and academia. And this is vital for us to innovate as a country, whereby government produces or provides the right policy environment, the academia produces the knowledge that is needed, and industry produces the funding. Then we're able to this helps in every critical sector, from agriculture to tourism to industry, and you name it. And today we're not able to do that. Today UTG is not contributing to promoting agriculture. UTG is not contributing to promoting tourism or industry. And I think it should be reversed, because universities are labs that should produce knowledge. What we've been experiencing at UTG is that we've been consumers of knowledge rather than producers of knowledge. And universities are supposed to produce knowledge. The society needs to solve its basic and complex problems. And that is that we've not been doing, because not because of we lacked the manpower at UTG, but because the governments, previous successive governments, have failed to take higher education subsector very seriously and invest massively in it. You need money. I mean, the budget allocated to higher education subsector last year was $260 million. What can that do? That cannot even provide a proper lab at UTG. What is $260 million? And almost 80% of that goes to operation cost, transportation, fuel, cars, travel, workshops. So what is left? That is why we are having these problems. That is why we cannot attract the best brains into UTG. That is why we cannot have the right facilities. We cannot have the right labs and the right libraries. And that is a problem that we have to look at if we are to really succeed as a nation.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Ceesay. Moving slightly away from education and focusing on the issues which you've kind of alluded to a little bit, affecting Gambia as a country and also the continent at large. I'm going to quote an excerpt from an article you wrote for the London School of Economics, where you say, the Gambia is considered to be one of mainland Africa's smallest and least important countries with no strategic resources. I want to know, Dr. Ceesay, what do you see as the fundamental problem in regards to resources, and why do you think we are considered by outsiders as so unimportant to the rest of the world?
Because of our geography, because of our size, and because of the role we play in the global market as well. We've been seen as producers of commodities, and also we've not been seen as a strategic country. I think Senegal has overshadowed us when it comes to that. When I say we lack strategic resources, even though we have resources that I think, if properly harnessed with the right ideas, with the right attitude, can move this country, but we don't have the strategic resources like oil and gas, like diamonds, like gold and silver, like those things you found in the Congo, in Angola, in Mozambique, and these countries. But at least we have resources that, if properly harnessed, I think we're able to move as a country and create a self-sustained economy. Look, the population of the Gambia in 1965 was almost 300,000 people. A very small market. Today we are 2.3 million people, and we are projected to reach 5 million people in 2050. I think the Gambia has what it takes now to produce a self-sustained economy that can really provide food security. Why? Because if we are to produce the goods and the amount of goods and services we produce for ourselves in this country on a yearly basis, if we are to produce those goods and services for ourselves, then this country can move. But you'll realize that most of the goods that we produce in this country come from outside. And we have the resources here. We just have to invest in key strategic industry, like in the agro industry and its value chain. Imagine agriculture and its value chain. Imagine the poultry industry and its value chain of eggs and mayonnaise. Imagine the livestock industry and its value chain of cheese, milk, yogurt, hair and skin, you name it. Imagine diversifying the tourism industry, promoting more internal tourism, promoting more safari tourism, and diversifying the tourism products. And imagine investing in the garment industry. I cannot believe that in the 21st century, the majority of Gambians still wear fogajai. What is fogajai? Fogajai is what the Europeans wear. They don't want it anymore, and they send it to us to wear. We can have our own garment industry. This polo shirt I'm wearing is not made in the UK, it's made in Bangladesh. We have talented Gambians here who can be designers. What we need, and we can even source the materials here to make our own clothes that are fit for purpose. We are not training our people to be good at what they want to do. And that is what is empowerment. That is training people and giving them the opportunity to be good at what they want to do. If somebody wants to be a carpenter, you provide the right training so he can become a good carpenter, so he can make furniture that is at par with furniture made in India and Dubai and China. But today, if I want to marry a second wife, which I am not planning to do, the next thing I'll think of is to go to Dubai and China to buy a furniture set. Our carpenters can make those kind of furniture. Look at our government offices, Haddy. The majority, in fact, 100% of the furnitures used in government offices are bought on Caraba Avenue from the Indians, and these furnitures come from outside. But the wood is sourced from Africa, from Gambia. Why can't we empower our carpenters, give them the right tools and the right training and the right knowledge to make those kind of furniture we need? But no, the furniture that come as second-hand furnitures or furnitures that are substandard from the Indians at Caraba Avenue, whilst our carpenters still continue making beds that they've been making from 1985, no changes. So we need to change that mentality that we have the resources. We have to look at ourselves first, look inwards. The problem with the Gambia, since independence, we are always taught that the solution to our development problems are outside. No, they are inside. It's time for us to look inwards. What do we have? What is our comparative advantage? We are not very good at technology. We cannot make artificial intelligence. We cannot make robots. We cannot make driverless cars. Let's leave that to the Asians and Europeans. But what can we do? We have a fertile soil. We have our marine resources. We have our white and black sand resources. We have our what they call for me, Gambia's gem is its youthful population. That is supposed to be the driving force of Gambia's change. What is this youthful population? The average age of the Gambian today is 17.6. It means over half of the population are young. That is a critical element of labor, but that labor needs to be refined by giving them the capacity they need to make sure that they produce the goods and services we need in this country, the courier services, the carpenter, the auto mechanics, hairdressing, everything we need should be produced inwards. The food, in fact, food. I cannot believe, Haddy, that in 2020, we still eat, most of the food we eat comes from outside. Even the most basic ones, from mayonnaise to ketchup, everything comes from outside. And this, we have the capacity to be able to produce these things for ourselves. So in short, the Gambia is able to move. If we really harness our youthful population, they have a huge potential, very talented, ready to work, eager to work, very passionate, and having a driving force, but also investing in the resources we have, our land resources. Look at the River Gambia today. It's been neglected. We have not even used 2% of its potential. Today, the River Gambia should be booming with river transport, moving goods and people up and down the river, having river taxis moving people so people have options of transportation. If you don't want to go by road to Kiang, you can take the river taxi to go to Kiang. But we are not doing all those things. We are not invested in the transportation sector, in transportation infrastructure. Our energy sector is poor. We are not even able to provide our energy needs for ourselves, electricity and water that are clean and cheap. We're not able to provide quality, relevant education that is universal and quality. We're not even able to provide primary health care to our people in this country in 2020. And we have all the potentials. It's just leadership, the right thinking, critical thinking, strategic thinking, having the right mindset, and making sure that we know what we want and how we can get it.
Thank you, Dr. Ceesay. And I'm sure you'll agree that this seems to be a recurring theme, not only in Gambia, to be fair to Gambia, but also across the continent. We are left behind on so many things, including digital, data, connectivity. As you know, the aim is for Africa to be fully connected by 2030, which, you know, if you ask me, I think it's too late. We've seen how important it is to have access to the internet during this pandemic when learning has completely stopped. lot for many African children because not every home is connected. And we have also had our own connection issues before the show started. I guess with that in mind, my question to you is, how do you see this being achieved and fast in the Gambia?
But it's just the investment and making sure that we have the right policy climate environment. And currently what we are seeing is that data is expensive in the Gambia. The digital divide is not only about the global south or the global north, it's also within the Gambian communities, homes. I mean, people living in mostly urban areas in the Greater Bay have more access to internet than the child living in the rural Gambia. And for me, this thinking of leaving no child behind, the only thing that can make it happen is to invest massively in the internet infrastructure to make sure that how water and electricity are basic universal goods for every Gambian. That is how internet and should be basic universal for every household in the Gambia. And that is not what's up. That is why when we had this pandemic, we had a problem. We're supposed to roll out online classes for students, but most students in the rural Gambia are left out. They cannot even have access to TV to watch most of the online TV classes, let alone having access to internet. So I think for us is to make sure that the right regulatory framework should be introduced in the Gambia insofar as the internet infrastructure is concerned, but also attract more investment into that particular sector so that every household in the Gambia, and I cannot understand, we have the ACE cable, we have these projects that are supposed to provide these things, but for some reason, implementation has been a problem in the Gambia. I don't know why. And for me, I think that's a critical aspect of it today. No matter what, most of these things I've just said, tourism, the agro industries, you name it, most of this, science, technology, and innovation should be the driving force. Without this, they cannot move because we live in the 21st century, like I said, in a rapidly changing world. And innovation is key. And for me, the driving force of all this is science and technology. And if we don't have that, then we cannot do anything because everything is dependent on that. And for us, the only thing that can also reduce our dependence, because today we are a very fragile country in every aspect. Most of the critical sectors we depend on are subject to external forces. Our today, we've mostly focused on subsistence agriculture. The 20% of our GDP is agriculture, but that is also subject to external shocks. If price commodities fall in the world market, we have a problem. Even tourism, Ebola, what happened? We lost 60% of our income that we are supposed to get from tourism. And look at this pandemic. We don't know when this whole thing, there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in the tourism sector. So hotels will remain closed and we cannot get the revenue we normally get from tourism. So for us, I think one of the things now is to look inwards now. And that's what many countries are doing now. Countries are going inwards now. Even though we always talk about how we have to promote free trade and so on and so forth, we live in a globalized world. But it's time for Gambia now to take a backseat and look at what we need to do. But like you said, science, technology, innovation should be key. And I think we need to create the right regulatory framework, the right policies, and create the right investment, especially public-private partnerships, to make sure that internet access is accessible, affordable to every household in the Gambia, so we leave no one behind.
Okay, so it sounds like investment and implementation is a challenge. But what about this though? You wrote a brilliant post on your Facebook page the other day where you said, and I quote, "We are selling all of our land without proper public planning, leaving no space for hospitals, schools, greenery, cemetery, etc. What do we leave behind for future generations?" And Dr. Ceesay, I pose the same question back to you. For those of us who, the younger generation, those of us that haven't started a family yet, will there be anything left for our children?
The current trend, the current pattern, I'm really worried about the future of this country. I foresee a looming environmental disaster. Just take a walk along the forests that we have remaining. They've cut down all the trees and burnt all the bush. Go to the quarry where they do sand mining. If you understand the geological issues, you'll understand that Gambia is heading for an environmental catastrophe. Look, there's what they call reserve land. The whole concept of reserve land is to meet our land needs today in terms of agriculture and residential areas, but also leave something for future generations so they can also do agriculture and have residential areas. But today, as we speak, We are selling all the reserve land. We're not keeping anything. We're not even doing the proper planning. Urban planning is a problem in this country. Normally, I take one peri-urban center as an example, Brikama, a very strategic place. Now, Brikama should be a place that should have a proper library for young people to be able to go and have access to library. But there is no single proper library in Brikama. Now, Brikama should have a proper football field for kids to go and develop their footballing talents. Brikama should have youth development hubs with all that goes with it, that kids can go and develop their talents in basketball, in swimming, in table tennis, you name it, in the recreation aspects of it. Yes. There is no place in the Gambia today where we have like green spaces, big parks with benches, with kind of fountains where people can go and relax. We're not having these spaces. So we're not properly planning the way we are using our land. Not only that, we're also using it in a way whereby we're not leaving room for future generations to have access to prime land as well, especially agricultural land. We are selling everything. The only things we are building today, we're not building schools or recreation hubs or youth development hubs or libraries. The things we are building are petrol stations and shops and houses for rent. We're not even coming up with housing projects because, like I said, we'll be 5 million in 2050. We don't have, we need housing for those 5 million people. We need jobs for those young people. We need nursery schools. And one of the things that Gambia has been lacking is ECD, that is early childhood development. The government has not invested in early childhood development. And I think this is critical if the Gambia is to reap the benefits of education, because that is where everything starts. These are the formative years. Every area should have public nursery schools for children to go and start. But in the rural areas, most of the ECDs are private schools. If I cannot afford to take my child to a nursery school, she has to stay at home or play in the streets. So in the rural areas, we don't have nursery schools. That is why, and this is affecting our education system. So obviously, we need to be very careful how we use our land. We need to plan properly and take note that future generations also are coming. And when they come, they need land, they need spaces, they need green spaces, they need recreational facilities. But we're not building all those things. And I think for me, that is the problem. And that which compounds this problem is the way we are really destroying our environment. And I think for me, that is key. We are burning down all our forests. We are cutting down all our trees. We are overutilizing our marine resources. We are overutilizing our sand resources. And for me, this really makes me really be worried about the future of this country. And I think every government should be worried about the future of this country. Until and unless we start the proper planning, we start thinking strategic. How do we build a country? Thinking that we have generations yet unborn that are coming, thinking of the demographic complexities that will befall this country in the next 25 years, then we'll be really having serious issues in this country.
And in terms of the land issue, I mean, I don't know how it works in the Gambia, but is that up to the council? Who was in charge of that?
Now, normally is the community lands. Normally is the alcalos. It's not the council. It is alcalos that sell. But I think government should. What we lack is a regulatory environment. Today we have a lot of what they call estate agents who are into land, but they're not regulated. They just go to a particular alcalo. They buy large swathes of land and start cutting them into 20 and selling them without proper planning. So when they go to a particular community, and they buy huge swathes of land, hectares of land, and cut them into pieces, they don't make room for schools. That, okay, in this area here, the population today is 500 people, but in 25 years, they'll go to 500,000 people. We need to leave space for schools to be built and expanded, leave space for football fields and other recreation facilities, leave space for parks, hospitals, and clinics. But we're not doing that. All we are building is 20 by 20 and just building home without making space for these critical institutions that we need to survive as a nation. And until and unless government comes in now to create the right regulatory framework to make sure the whole land lease, whether it's leaseholding or land sale is regulated, to make sure that these estate agents are regulated, to make sure that proper guidelines are followed. Even though we have these guidelines, we have the regulatory framework, we have the legal framework, they're not being followed. People just do what they want to do. There is so much impunity in this country today that people just do what they want to do. And this land thing is not only a problem in terms of planning, it is also a catastrophe in the making. It is also a security issue. And I've always been securitizing it because why? We have communities that are not very happy the way their land is being sold. We have communities in the Combos that are very not very happy because of the way government is really selling their reserve lands, and they are not benefiting anything from it. Because for me, every community must benefit from the land from your community, but government is just sharing land left, right, and center without the communities benefiting from it. And because of all those kind of problems, it could really bode not well for the Gambia if the government doesn't really intervene now and comes up with a moratorium and tries to really do an inventory of all land in the Gambia and put them in a system to understand exactly what land do we have, what land do we have remaining, who owns what do we keep for future generations. If that does not happen, then we'll be really looming for a disaster in this country in the near future.
Thank you, Dr. Ceesay. Again, on the issues facing young people in the country, we've seen that as a result of the lack of opportunities in the country, young people have lost hope in their futures and taken the back way journey as we know it. How do you respond to the images of thousands of young Africans crossing the borders to make it to European shores? We've heard stories of some who have been through some very terrible ordeals, and very recently as well, some are being deported or maybe returned back home is a better word. What is your response to this? And please take all the time you need.
Well, I think we've been having this problem for quite a while now, the problem of irregular migration. Because we have really failed to really look deep into the structural problems of irregular migration. That why will a young man, a young person, whether a man or woman, decide to leave his home or her home to brace this very dangerous journey to Europe? We've been having problems in this country. There's been a lot of structural violence in this country against young people. We did not only fail to provide opportunities for young people to live a meaningful life, but we also subject them to a lot of structural violence, a lot of discrimination in our homes and in our communities, whereby this whole concept of the semester syndrome is also causing problems. Young people feel discriminated in the sense that you come from Europe, even though I'm a police officer in the Gambia, you are my younger brother. They value your contribution more than me. They give you more respect than me in the home and in the street. And young people feel discriminated, and this kind of violence is forcing them to leave. So there are sociocultural undercurrents that are the kind of the push factors as well, and not only the economic. I did a lot of research on this irregular migration thing. I've been in contact with a lot of irregular migrants, and most of them were doing well. They have their own businesses. Some were even working in the Gambia, but they had to go because of some of the sociocultural undercurrents, and I think that's a problem. And I think the Gambia now should really have a strategy in how to engage young people. What we had lacked since Jammeh's era, Barrow's era, is having a comprehensive strategy. How do we engage the young people? They're a critical force. You cannot escape it. You cannot ignore them. Like I said, the average age of this country is 17.6 years. Young people make the majority of this country. We must engage them. We must come up with a comprehensive strategy how to engage them. How do we provide opportunities for them? What do they want? What institutions do we build for young people? How do we engage in pro-youth activities? How do we bring necessary environment that focus on young people? And because we are not doing that, and because we've also neglected the rural areas, most young people leave the rural areas because there are no facilities in the rural areas. No good hospitals, no good roads, no good schools, no jobs. So what they do is they come to the urban areas. When they come to the urban areas now are congested. Almost 60% of our population now live in the urban areas. It means that now, if the urban area was made for 500,000 people, now we have almost 1.1 million people living here. There's a problem of housing, problem of jobs, problem of accommodation and everything. So young people want to leave because of the structural violence, because of no opportunities, because they realize that if they stay here, they have no chance of making it. And they see their colleagues going to Europe and coming back and making it in 2-3 years. So they think that the only place you can make it is Europe. So we have to change that mentality. We have to engage our young people. We have to invest in young people. And how do you invest in young people? You make sure you invest in vocational institutes. You invest in skills training centers. You invest in talent development centers, so that every youth, because every youth has a talent. Every youth in the Gambia has a talent that is God-given, inherent, that you are born with. But we have to create the necessary environment so you can be able to develop your talent. There are those who are they are good at football. They are football stars, but they'll never fulfill that dream because we fail to create the environment that can really develop that footballing talent in them. There are those who are supposed to be pilots and engineers and good lawyers, but we've never created the environment so that you can be that good lawyer. Today, most of the lawyers in the Gambia are from urban, born and raised in urban Gambia and not from rural Gambia. Most of the pilots, most of the engineers, because the opportunities are not there until we make sure that we decentralize these opportunities, until we make sure that we decentralize development, make sure that the kind of good schools we build in the Combos are also built in rural Gambia. The kind of good roads we built in the Combos are also built in rural Gambia, so that every Gambian child, no matter where you're born, no matter from which parent, no matter from which socioeconomic background, you have equal access and a good start in life, access to quality, relevant education, so that no matter where you are born, you can fulfill your dreams in this country, whether it's in football, it's in sports, it's in engineering, it's in being a lawyer, it's in academia, so that every Gambian child will fulfill your dreams. But the way we've really shared our resources, it's not fair. We've just focused development in the urban areas, in Banjul, Serekunda, Brikama area, and forgot the rural Gambia. And that is a problem in the Gambia today. Until and unless we change that mindset, we'll have a lot of our young people who will never fulfill their true potentials, who will see themselves as failures, who will be very pessimistic and see this country as not a country for them, and they would want to leave and brave the ocean. And today we have another problem finally, Haddy. Research tells us that international migration has decreased in the past 2 years. That is migrating from, because why? Libya has disintegrated. Most young people use Libya as a corridor to go to Europe, but they have this scenario. However, the same research tells us that rural-urban migration has increased. So it means that young people are living rural Gambia, coming to urban Gambia, but there's no corresponding flight or they're not leaving again from urban Gambia to go to Europe. So all of them are packed in urban Gambia with security problems, with no jobs, with frustration. That's a powder keg in this country if we don't engage these young people in a very constructive way. And there is this concept of involuntary immobility, which is also destroying this country. What is involuntary immobility? You have all these young people who have the aspiration to leave, but they will not leave. But because they have the aspiration to leave, they don't engage in politics. They don't go and build their capacities. They don't want to educate themselves. They are in this state of waiting. That is what scholars call the state of waiting. They're just sitting and waiting to leave, but they'll never leave. 2 years, 3 years, 10 years wasted. They've not left. They've not improved themselves. And I think the government should really start engaging these young people and providing the opportunities for them so they can be able to build their talents here, build their skills here, and give them the mindset and inspire them that they can make it in their own country.
Okay, I promised not to talk about politics on the show, and I told you before the interview that I didn't want us to get into it, but I think everything we're talking about boils down to politics and making the right policies. So just very quickly, my main question in terms of politics in the Gambia is, are the ethnic tensions we hear about in politics, particularly on social media, there's a lot of it, are they real or exaggerated? And this is a concern, Dr. Ceesay, because we've seen how painful and devastating this can be in other countries. I just want you to address this issue.
I think based on my experience, because people are going to have different experiences based on where you live and who you interact with. I think Gambia is a fairly cohesive, socially cohesive society where different people from different backgrounds, whether it's religion or ethnicity, cohabit and exist in peaceful coexistence. And I think that is still happening. Even though we can have politics sometimes trying to bring these kind of ideas, but I don't think it overshadows that peaceful relationship we have among the different tribes. I mean, I traveled a lot in upcountry, and I'm not seeing these things are not so apparent that can make me get worried that the Gambia might just sleepwalk into some kind of conflict, ethnic conflict or religious conflict. I'm not seeing those things. I think the way we've lived together, and I think credit goes to the first government. You see, Jawara was given a task not only to usher in independence, but to build a nation state from disparate groupings of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and he did that very well. And not only him, in fact, most of the founding fathers of African independence also managed to do the same thing. Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania, obviously, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, obviously, you have the Hastings Banda of Malawi, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. They managed to build a nation state by making sure that these disparate groups, because you have to understand the arbitrary nature of African borders. African state formation was very complex and is very different from European state formation. They made states from arbitrary borders, bringing people who were once hostile to each other as one country and call it the Gambia or Nigeria or Sierra Leone. But again, the task of these founding fathers was to build that nation state, to make sure that there is social cohesion, so that everybody living within that nation, that state, sees itself as one nation. And I think our founding fathers we need to credit for that. It's still, even though there are episodes of sometimes tribal bigotry, obviously, because of politics, but I don't think it's so overwhelming that it really needs to make us be afraid. What I see online, the kind of bigotry I see online does not really align or correspond to the kind of peaceful relations, peaceful coexistence, the social cohesion I see on the ground in Fonyi, in Nyomi, in Jara, in Kiang, in the Combos. When I go to these places, I see people living side by side. I've seen how intermarriages have made the Gambia into a melting pot of different tribes and different ethnicities. And I think all of us have a role to play to make sure we preach this idea of social cohesion and this idea that our diversity actually, Haddy, is our strength. Our diversity is our strength. The Gambia is diverse, but we are very unique in the sense that we have almost 10 different ethno-linguistic groupings in the Gambia, which is very easy to manage as compared to Nigeria, which has almost 400 ethno-linguistic. You go to the Congo, we have almost hundreds of ethno-linguistic languages. Gambia, we have only 10. Intermarried, live peaceful, socially cohesive. It's more easy to manage. And that the whole idea, we need to imbue in the young generation to see themselves first and foremost as Gambians, first and foremost as promoting Gambian agenda, first and foremost as building one nation, whereby what is important is not the tribe you come from, it's not the religion you are, it's not the area you come from, but the opportunities you are given to live a worthwhile and dignified life.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ceesay. Now let's talk about some of the other issues confronting the political space. There is, I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me, huge skepticism about Gambian politicians from the public. Many Gambians believe we lack competent leaders. And Gambia as a country and as a people have been through some very difficult times. So as we prepare for Gambians to vote again next year, what should be the very first thing any party leader does when they win the vote?
I think the first thing they do is to come up with a new development agenda. In fact, before they win that should be the thinking now. We need a paradigm shift insofar as we think of development in this country. I've always argued that 1965 was the epoch for independence. People voted to get independence. 2016, we voted for democracy. Now we are going to vote for development. I think any leader that wins the 2021 elections should be able to come up or implement, because before you even win, you should be able to sell a development agenda, a blueprint to the people that the people can buy. That is why you are voted in. And making sure that blueprint is put into practice and it is not aborted. What we have failed in 2016 cannot be repeated in 2021. There was a very good agenda for 2016 that would reform this country and do the institutional reforms and put the Gambia on track for democratic consolidation and development. That failed because that agenda was aborted. I think the next government that is coming should not abort its agenda that is going to sell to the people. And I think one of the key things that we should look at now is that that government should come up with the right strategies to reduce our dependence on outside forces in terms of foreign aid and grants. Yes, in the short term, foreign aid can help in your development agenda. But the long-term strategic thinking is that how do we decouple ourselves from foreign aid dependence and make sure we build an economy that is strong, that is transformative, and that is vibrant, and that can be able to solve our basic problems. And that government should be able to look at the critical strategic sectors and do the right investments and create the right regulatory framework, the right environment to invest the right investors, not the exploitative investors though, but the right development-oriented investors, investors who can come and respect our laws and respect our labor laws and not exploit our workers, and respect our environmental laws and try to exploit our resources. These are the kind of investors you have to bring in. But also importantly, I tell you one thing, the people who can make Gambia move are in the diaspora. Most of the most of the capacity within in the short term before we build the long-term capacity in the diaspora? How do you attract diaspora Gambians with the right knowledge, with the right skill set to come home and help in this nation building? I think any serious leader that wins the 2020 election should come up with the right strategy to attract diaspora Gambians from different fields with the different expertise to come and help in nation building. I think that is really, really key. If you don't do that, you might even have all the money given to you by Western donors, but if you don't have the right capacity, the right mental, the right resources, human resources, to be able to transform that money into actual implementable plans, then you cannot succeed. That is why I faulted the government when they went to this donor conference in Belgium to get the money from the European Union and also other donors to come and do their national development plan. But they failed to do a corresponding conference to be able to attack the best brains from the diaspora, to bring them and help them so that the money that is given to us by the donors can be used, can be put into proper practice by the proper human resources that we can get from the diaspora. I think any government should be able to think like that, because you need the diaspora Gambians. That's where the expertise is. Our middle class currently lives in the diaspora. That's where all the knowledge is. How do we bring them to help in nation building? I think any serious government should really focus on that.
Okay, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but also in terms of bringing the people in the diaspora back, we're really talking about restoring confidence and having a competent leader that people will be confident in. As a political scientist, what can you tell us? What can you tell us about the type of leadership the Gambia needs, and also the type of leader that we will rally around?
I think a leader that is transparent and a leader that is accountable to the people, a leader that sees himself as a servant to the people, a leader that believes in the potentials of the people, a leader that listens as well, that has empathy, that has a vision as well, and that can also inspire hope in the generation. A leader that can also communicate with the population and tries to understand the problems of the people. I think that is really key. That is what has been lacking in the Gambia in the past. Leaders that are transparent, that are accountable to the people, that understand that they have a social contract with the people, that they're employed by people to do a particular job. And in doing that job, they have to be accountable to the people in every step of the way. That can also easily communicate with the people. And that also is seen to be more empathetic and understand the plight of the people by making sure that you understand the problems the people are facing on a daily basis at the very micro level, and make sure you communicate these with the people and they understand that you understand their problems. I think this is really key. What we've been having recently is leaders that are just up there and the population are down here, and people worship that leader. They think that he's omnipotent. They think that he owns their lives and only he can make them leave. We need to break that barrier so that there is more link between the people and the leader. And the leader should come up with also innovative ways of doing things as a leader. Gone are the days when you have these huge convoys, a president passing by with 15, 20 vehicles, with anti-aircraft missiles, with these big, no, just small, I mean, so that the people see you. With this tinted glass, you remove them so that people feel you, they see you, they see you as their leader. I think this is really key. So the leader we have to change the way we do things as a leader. We remove all this bureaucratic red tape, all these complex, rigid relationship the leader has with the people, to make it more simple so that the leader can wake up in the morning, go to schools, go to markets, go to football fields and interact with the young people, know their problem, communicate more with the young people, be transparent, be accountable, let the people see you as their leader who can listen, especially a leader who listens and also who is ready to take criticisms. Because you see, criticisms make us grow, they develop you. Nobody's perfect, not even the leader. So once you listen to criticisms, you want to listen to many people, you listen to what the population is saying, and the population see that you are reacting to what they are saying. I think this is what the people really want now going forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ceesay. I feel like we've talked a lot about the challenges we're facing, but I want us to end with a solution, some of the solutions. So, you know, we all know aspirations are very high at the moment. We have seen much more activity and freedom, you know, in terms of the press, the private sector, in politics, and even the young people themselves. How do we deliver then, Dr. Ceesay, and move from aspiration to provision of high quality jobs and opportunities for young people?
new thinking and investment. New thinking only. We need to have, and also believing in ourselves as a country that we can make it, and also believe in ourselves that we have the resources, we have everything we need to make it as a country. And I think that is key. Believing in ourselves and making sure that now, what do we do moving forward? What is the blueprint? What is the plan in the short, medium, and long term? What do we need to do now? Do we need to fight corruption? How do we fight corruption? How do we leverage on external support, our development partners? How do we leverage and make sure that our debt we have this, what they call debt relief, for example? How do we make sure in the medium term, how do we invest in the agro industry? How do we invest in young people? How do we build the skills pool we need for our young people to be more engaged? How do we create civic space? How do we create the environment? I think these are key moving forward. Otherwise, we will be stuck as a nation. I think what we need now is new thinking, a paradigm shift in the way we think about ourselves, a paradigm shift in the way we think about development, a paradigm shift in the way we think about every aspect of our existence, knowing that we can make it as a country. If Rwanda can make it after being decimated through genocide in 1994, and today we look up to Rwanda as a country that has made it as a model for African development, why can't Gambia make it? Our only problem was 22 years of dictatorship. We have a transition now. I think now it's time for new thinking, a paradigm shift in the way we think about ourselves, and believing in ourselves, and making our young people believe that they can make it in their own country by also nurturing a new generation of leaders, and not only one leader, but a new generation of leaders that will surge this country forward into the 21st century, making use of information technology, making use of the resources we have, making use of the pool of young, talented, skillful people we have. I think this country can really make it.
Dr. Ceesay, thank you so much. It has been such an engaging conversation, and as you know, it is always a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you very much, Haddy. You hear it's raining, there's thunder outside, it's raining seriously.
I can hear.
And there's no electricity at the moment, so it's dark in here.
I'm glad the internet let us carry through. I'm just glad we're
it's hot and sticky as well. So this is the daily struggle of the average Gambian lecturer in the Gambia. Yes.
Thank you again, Dr. Ceesay, and thank you to everybody watching.
Talking to you.
Thank you. That's it for this weekend's conversation. Thank you to everybody watching and contributing from home, and I'll see you next Saturday. Hi everyone, my name is Haddy and I'm a journalist and communications specialist. I believe that as Africans, we should be in charge of every narrative coming out of Africa. We have a lot of positive stories to tell and share with the world, and I'm determined to use my platform to make that a reality. This is why I've teamed up with the FATA Network to bring you a brand new show, Stories from the Continent, every Saturday at 4 p.m. Do make sure you join us. There will be lots of fun, informative, and impactful conversation.